Been immensely frustrating, hasn't it, the last 4 days?
Yes, it has been, and as you said, the bit of cricket that we did get was quite exciting.
It really
we saw
was,
some
yeah.
pretty good cricket, both batting and the bowling, but we can't do much about the weather, can we?
Well, we're going to have a bit of a debate about the stuff that has happened here during this Test match. So these are the key points that we are going to go through. Up for debate, ground conditions, the light, is it dangerous? The perceived lack of urgency in terms of trying to start the mop-up process perhaps a little earlier than has been, and the lack of communication from the officials. Where should we start, Michael?
Start with you being up at 4:20 a.m.
Exactly.
What are you doing up at 4:20
I can't go anywhere. I didn't do anything wrong. I can't get out of the hotel. We're locked down in biosecurity. It woke me up. Didn't woke you up. You slept like a baby right through. It woke you up, though, didn't it?
It did. And it was an unbelievable storm. And clearly, we've sent Rob Key out there. We're not allowed to go out there other than one of our commentators, and Rob Key says it's unfit. So that's the first starting point today. It's been hugely frustrating, the Test match, because we had a wonderful Test match at Old Trafford. See two good teams in competition here. And clearly there's a massive worldwide audience as well, given the situation that we're in. People are desperate for live sport all around the world. Viewing figures exceptional, people watching in Pakistan, Australia, all over the place. So great frustration from everybody, really.
Before we head into the debate, just in terms of, say, a bowler running up on a wet outfield, you can't do that, can you? You take your water onto the square, your footing isn't going to be there.
No, well, that's a big problem. Once you start running up and your feet are moving when you put them down to push off again for the next step, that's going to throw you off totally. We had a similar situation, not with wet ground, but don't know if you remember in Antigua.
When the
sand.
Yeah, the sand. Once your feet are moving, every time you try to push off for your next stride, your foot is moving, you just cannot do it as a fast bowler. And we had that abandoned Test match in Antigua because of it, because of the sand that was on the outfield.
Well, it's a wet outfield today, not a sandy outfield. Where should we start then?
Well, let's start with the regulations as they are, the ground conditions, the first area up for debate. It's pretty straightforward, really. The law, 2.7.1, says it's solely for the umpires to decide whether the conditions are suitable for play. I mean, the interesting thing is the next 2 points. Conditions should not be regarded as either dangerous or unreasonable merely because they're not ideal, and the fact that the grass and the ball are wet doesn't warrant the ground conditions being regarded as dangerous or unreasonable. So built into the regulations is an encouragement to play whenever you can. Now, I think everybody would recognise, as Mikey said there, that sometimes the weather doesn't play ball, conditions are unfit. Rob Key says they're unfit at the moment, umpires say they're unfit at the moment, so there's not really much room for debate there. But just to note that the regs and the laws do have that kind of encouragement to play at all times when possible, even if it's not ideal.
But it is subjective.
That is subjective. Umpires are former players. They'll be former bowlers or former batsmen. And we like to think we're in a more neutral position, which is why we sent Rob Key down there, because he's doing naff all else. So he can go have a look and tell us. And he says it's unfit, and I'm happy to go on that.
If the ball gets wet and it keeps regularly getting wet, would you be happy as a bowler for the umpires to just say, well, here's a dry one, and keep changing the ball?
No, I don't think anybody would be happy with that at all, Ward, because I just see throughout the day, people are working on a ball, whether they're a spinner or a fast bowler. They are working on the ball to try and get one side of that ball shine or get one side of it heavier than the other, because you're looking for some sort of a bias as a bowler. Once that brand new ball is gone and you can no longer use your action to do whatever you want to do with the ball, you're looking for a bias. So if they're constantly changing the ball, that is constantly taking away the bit of an advantage that you are looking for as a bowler. So I don't think that would...
The issues of light, because we spend a lot of time off the field.
And I think this is where there's been more frustration in this game. If the ground is too boggy to play, it's too boggy to play. The light is very interesting because, again, if we put up the regulations as they stand, it says the umpires shall be entitled to use light meter readings as a guideline. It doesn't say they have to, but they shall be entitled to do. And then the light meter readings may be used by umpires, not must, may be used by umpires to determine whether there's been a deterioration or improvement, and as a benchmark. So there's kind of room in there for a bit more flexibility than perhaps has been seen by most umpires. If you ask any umpire at the moment, international umpire, they will always use a light meter for understandable reasons, which I know we'll come to, and they will always set a benchmark reading for the game. And after that, they take that reading and then they'll go off. Now, the regulations actually allow for a bit more flexibility, so it is subjective, and the umpires can say, well, we don't think this bowling's quick enough, the batsman is a number 3, not a number 8, he's perfectly protected, the pitch is flat, we'll allow it to happen. Now, why the umpires don't do that is because they want to be seen to be fair to both sides. But I think this is an issue the game has to grasp, because the general public will find it very hard to understand why we have floodlights on, why you play day-night cricket, why you're not able to play when, as we mentioned, there was a game going on the nursery ground there with Wahab Riaz bowling at full tilt with no floodlights, and people
no sight screens,
no sight screen, and people were playing. So I think this is an issue the game has to grasp, and it has to do better than it is doing right now.
Albeit that was happening with a white ball. Now, two things here. One, the red ball with the white sight screens and the floodlights, every batsman has said that's tricky to pick up, but they've got protective gear on, pads, box, helmet, you name it. How much do you think the umpires are taking into consideration their own safety? They're standing at square leg and a Joss Butler flips one like that, he hits it hard, don't pick it up straight away, you're in trouble. Zach Crawley said on an interview the other day, he was fielding down on the boundary at deep square leg, a ball was hit out to mid-wicket, he didn't see it. So how much is it about the protection of the umpires, physically, and indeed the fielders?
That has to be taken into consideration, Wardy, but it's not the first time that you have seen a fielder in the deep not pick up a ball when a shot has been played. It doesn't have to be dark. We have seen it in broad daylight when fielders just don't pick up the direction.
Comes out of the crowd or something.
It just comes out of the crowd, or the background isn't ideal, because not every cricket ground that you go to, even empty cricket grounds that have white seats. So the background cannot be ideal. So I don't think that is a serious factor as far as conditions of play are concerned. I think a lot of umpires are worried, as I said, about not perceived to be doing it fairly, because a team may be in a situation where they're about to lose a test match. It is as dark as it was when they came off the day before. And the umpires say, oh, it doesn't look that dark to me. But once he uses that light meter, and he said, listen, when we came off, it was 4.8, just to call a number. It is a 4.8 now, so we are going off. No one can argue, and the umpire is safe. No one can say, oh, he's trying to be advantage or disadvantage anyone. So I think that is why almost every umpire, as Ad says, uses a light meter. He's trying to protect himself as well.
The game is a dangerous game. That's the first thing to note, really, in any circumstances. A number 10, Devon Malcolm, Phil Tufnell will go out and face Wasim Akram, Curtly Ambrose at any stage, and can get hurt in broad daylight. Yeah. And I don't think actually that when the light deteriorates to a degree, that necessarily makes it more dangerous. So I do think this is an issue that the game has to grasp eventually.
The only example I can really think where an umpire has used his own discretion, you were involved.
Absolutely. Nasser was captain. We played a game in Karachi, and the sun had gone down, and there were no floodlights. It was bizarre, actually. The mosques signal the sound for when the sun has gone down, the call to prayer. And that noise had gone out by the time that game had finished. And Steve Buckner actually, as Mikey says, generally the umpires want to be seen to be fair to both sides, so they'll take the reading. Steve Buckner just used his own discretion in that instance. Because Pakistan were time wasting towards the end of that game, he just said, we're going to stay out here. And we stayed out until it was pitch black. And if you remember, the winning run was hit by Thorpe, I think, to deep point, and Inzamam just stood there like that. He couldn't see the ball. But that is the only time I can think that has happened, really.
Well, let's speak to the captain on that particular trip and the captain of that test match, because Nasser's over in the third man chair. Let's have from what you've seen over the last few days, what is your take on how the umpires have handled this light issue?
I've agreed with everything that's been said down there. And just to put it in some context, today is a completely different day. That storm that you put on overnight, there's no way we can start on time. So it's just those first 3 days I think everyone is talking about. At the end of day 3, when we'd had very little rain, after a week of record temperatures, suddenly we'd only played 86 overs of cricket. And that is just not good enough, in my opinion. There is in that Law 271, if we can put it back up, there is a bit in there about conditions should not be regarded as either dangerous or unreasonable because they are not ideal, merely because they are not ideal. And I know that's to do with fitness for play, but I think that should be also for the light. Merely because it's not ideal, merely because the red ball isn't picked up as well, is not a reason for walking off.
Actually.
Yeah, that's not a reason for walking off the field. And I think that is the general point here, actually. I think we have all been brought up in an era because cricketers played so much cricket. Let's be honest, we all played so much cricket. We all occasionally opened our curtains up and thought, thank God it's raining. We can put up our feet all day. We were all offered the light at 5 o'clock and we were exhausted. And what was the first thing we did? We'll take the light and walk off. We can't afford to do that anymore. These are unusual times. Just one thing you guys haven't mentioned down there is the context. Everyone has been in quarantine. Countries have flown over and sacrificed a lot to go in quarantine. People have gone into bubbles for weeks. Jack Leach has been in a bubble for weeks without playing a game of cricket. And when you have an opportunity to play and the world is watching, do everything you can to stay on and not have the old mindset of everything you can to go off. It is time we changed our mindset as a sport. Millions are watching. The ECB, even if we put on all our cricket today, this summer, could be over £100 million down. We can't afford to lose the spectators that are desperate to watch cricket. Yesterday they called it off at 3:45. By 4 o'clock it was bright sunshine. And even if it took 2 hours to get the ground ready, you're still getting cricket at 6 o'clock. Even if you're giving
But they said it was going to take 3 hours. Sorry to interrupt. They said it was going to take 3 hours.
Fine.
And in fairness, we weren't able to go out and have a look like Rob has done this morning.
But that's fine. My maths tells me that's 6:45. You play for 45. We've gone months without sport or cricket. That's the old mentality of it's a bit tight. We'll call it off today. Just do whatever you can to stay on. So I'm just calling for a change of mentality. The one thing this week shows us is that we are still in the old school mentality. Do whatever it can to get off, not whatever you can to stay on a cricket field. You know, there are so many things. Sawdust yesterday, you go out, 11 o'clock, sawdust. There was no sawdust out there. Why not? Club games, they'd be putting sawdust out. Why don't we start at 10:30, Ian Ward, please? Yesterday at 10:30, it was perfect, bright sunshine. You knew the rain was coming. Sky are quite happy to make up time at 10:30 in the morning. We do it abroad. We've done it in 2005 in England. Why don't we make up time? So here's the, you know, at the end of the day, when it's getting darker, we make up half an hour. At the beginning of the day, when it's getting lighter, we don't make up half an hour. Where is the sense in that? So try and use every single window of opportunity to keep this game on. I mean, explain to a kid. You take your kid. We haven't got crowds here at the moment. You take your kid to a game of cricket. You sat down. He's looked forward to it. And I've been there with my boy, football, cricket. They've looked forward for it for a week. They talk about it. Ticket prices go through the roof. They've sat next to you. It's getting a bit dark. They turn the lights on. And then he's like, all right, the lights are on. I'm going to watch cricket under lights. 10 minutes later, they're walking off. Turn to Dad, why are they going off? The light's not good enough. You know, explain that to your kid. Why are they going off? Because they don't quite see the red ball. You know, it isn't that line merely not adequate or merely not good enough. It has just got to be, you've got to try and stay on.